Hello. I'm going to read from the Selected Stories of O. Henry, published by Barnes& Noble Classics, with really great introduction notes by Victoria Blake. The story I'm going to read is The Lonesome Road. Brown as a coffee berry, rugged, pistoled, spurred, wary, indefeasible, I saw my old friend, Deputy Marshal Buck Caperton, stumble, with jingling rowels, into a chair in the marshal's outer office. And because the courthouse was almost deserted at that hour, and because Buck would sometimes relate to me things that were out of print, I followed him in and tricked him into talk through a knowledge of a weakness he had. For cigarettes rolled with sweet corn husk were as honey to Buck's palate, and though he could finger a trigger of a .45 with skill and suddenness, he never could learn to roll a cigarette. It was through no fault of mine, for I rolled the cigarettes tight and smooth, but the upshot of some whim of his own, that instead of to an Odyssey of the Chaparral, I listened to a dissertation upon matrimony. This from Buck Caperton. But I maintained the cigarettes were impeccable, and crave absolution for myself. "We just brought in Jim and Bud Granbury," said Buck. "Train robbing, you know. Held up the Ranses Pass last month. We caught 'em in the 20-mile pear flat south of Nueces." "Had much trouble corralling them?" I asked, for here was the meat that my hunger for epics craved. "Some," says Buck, and then during a little pause his thoughts stampeded off the trail. "It's kind of queer about women," he went on, "and the place they're supposed to occupy in botany. If I was asked to classify 'em, I'd say there was a human loco weed. Ever see a bronc that's been chewing loco? Ride him up to a puddle of water 2 feet wide, and he'll grab a snort and fall back on you. Looks as big as the Mississippi River to him. Next trip, he'd walk into a canyon 1,000 feet deep, thinking it was a prairie dog hole. Same way with a married man. I was thinking of Perry Roundtree, that used to be my sidekicker before he committed matrimony. In them days, me and Perry hated inn disturbances of any kind. We roamed around considerable, stirring up the echoes and making 'em attend to business. Why, when me and Perry wanted to have some fun in the town, it was a picnic for the census takers. They just counted the marshal's posse that it took to subdue us, and there was your population. But then there came along this Mariana Goodnight girl and looked at Perry sideways, and he was all bridle-wise and saddle-broke before you could skin a yearling. I wasn't even asked to the wedding. I reckon the bride had my pedigree and the front elevation of my habits all mapped out, and she decided that Perry would trot better in double harness without an unconverted Mustang like Buck Caperton whickering around on the matrimonial range. So it was 6 months before I saw Perry again. One day I was passing on the edge of town, and I see something like a man in a little yard by a little house with a sprinkling pot squirting water on a rose bush. Seemed to me I'd seen something like it before, and I stopped at the gate, trying to figure out its brands. 'Twas not Perry Roundtree, but was kind of a curdled jellyfish matrimony had made out of him. Homicide was what that Mariana had perpetrated. He was looking well enough, but he had on a white collar and shoes, and you could tell in a minute that he'd speak polite and pay taxes and stick his little finger out while drinking, just like a sheepman or a citizen. Great skyrockets, but I hated to see Perry all corrupted and willy-eyes like that. He came out to the gate and shook hands, and I says, with scorn and speaking like a paroquet with a peep, "Beg pardon, Mr. Roundtree, I believe. Seems to me I sagitated at your associations once, if I am not mistaken." "Oh, go to the devil, Buck," says Perry, polite, as I was afraid he'd be. "Well, then," says I, "you poor contaminated adjunct of a sprinkling pot and a degraded household pet, what'd you go and do it for? Look at you, all decent and unriotous, and only fit to sit on juries and mend the woodhouse door. You was a man once. I have hostility for all such acts. Why don't you go in the house and count the tidies or set the clock, and not stand out here in the atmosphere? A jackrabbit might come along and bite you. Now, Buck," says Perry, speaking mild and somewhat sorrowful, you don't understand. A married man has got to be different. He feels different from a tough old cloudburst like you. It's sinful to waste time pulling up towns just to look at their roots and playing faro and looking upon red liquor and such restless policies as them. There was a time, I says, and I expect I sighed when I mentioned it, when a certain domesticated little Mary's lamb I could name was some instructed himself in the line of pernicious unsprightliness. I never expected, Perry, to see you reduced down from a full-grown pestilence to such a frivolous fraction of a man. Why, says I, you've got a necktie on, and you speak a senseless kind of indoor drivel that reminds me of a storekeeper or a lady. You look to me like you might tote an umbrella and wear suspenders and go home of nights. The little woman, says Perry, has made some improvements, I believe. You can understand, Buck. I haven't been away from the house at night since we was married. And we talked on a while, me and Perry, and as sure as I live, that man interrupted me in the middle of my talk to tell me about 6 tomato plants he had grown in his garden. Shoved his agricultural degradation right up under my nose while I was telling him about the fun we had tarring and feathering that faro dealer at California Pete's layout. But by and by, Perry shows a flicker of sense. Buck, says he, I'll have to admit that it is a little dull at times. Not that I'm not perfectly happy with the little woman, but a man seems to require some excitement now and then. Now, I'll tell you, Mary Ann has gone visiting this afternoon, and she won't be home till 7 o'clock. That's the limit for both of us, 7 o'clock. Neither of us ever stays out a minute after that time unless we are together. Now, I'm glad you came along, Buck, says Perry, for I'm feeling just like having one more rip-roaring razoo with you for the sake of old times. What you say to us putting in the afternoon having fun? I'd like it fine, says Perry. I slapped that old captive range rider half across his little garden. Get your hat, you old dried-up alligator, I shouts. You ain't dead yet. You're part human anyhow, if you did get all bogged up in matrimony. We'll take this town to pieces and see what makes it tick. We'll make all kinds of profligate demands upon the science of cork-pulling. You'll grow horns yet, old muley cow, says I, punching Perry in the ribs, if you trot around on the trail of ice with your Uncle Buck. I'll have to be home by 7, you know, says Perry again. Oh, yes, says I, winking to myself, for I knew the kind of 7 o'clocks Perry Roundtree got back by after he once got to passing repartee with the bartenders. We goes down to the Gray Buell Saloon, that old 'dobe building by the depot. Give it a name, says I, as soon as we got one hoof on the footrest. Sarsaparilla, says Perry. You could have knocked me down with a lemon peeling. Insult me as much as you want to, I says to Perry, but don't startle the bartender. He may have heart disease. Come on now, your tongue got twisted. The tall glasses I order and the bottle in the left-hand corner of the ice chest. Sarsaparilla, repeats Perry, and then his eyes gets animated. And I see he's got some great scheme in his mind he wants to emit. Buck, he says, all interested, I'll tell you what. I want to make this a red-letter day. I've been keeping close at home, and I want to turn myself loose. We'll have the highest old time you ever saw. We'll go in the back room here and play checkers till 6:30. I leaned against the bar, and I says to gotch-eared Mike, who was on watch, for God's sakes, don't mention this. You know what Perry used to be. He's had the fever, and Doc says we must humor him. I went in the back room with Perry. Before we closed the door, I says to Mike, don't ever let it straggle out from under your hat that you seen Buck Caperton fraternal with sarsaparilla or persona grata with checkerboard, or I'll make a swallow fork in your other ear. I locked the door, and me and Perry played checkers. To see that poor old humiliated piece of household bric-a-brac sitting there and sniggering out loud whenever he jumped a man, and all obnoxious with animation when he got into my king row, would have made a sheep-dog sick with mortification. Him that was once satisfied only when he was pegging 6-boards at Keno, or giving the faro dealers nervous prostration, to see him pushing them checkers about like Sally Louisa at a school children's party, why, I was all smothered up with mortification. And I sits there playing the black man, all sweating for fear somebody I knew would find it out. And I thinks to myself some about this marrying business and how it seems to be the same kind of a game that Mrs. Delilah played. She give her old man a haircut, and everybody knows what a man's head looks like after a woman cuts his hair. And then when the Pharisees came around to guy him, he was so shamed he went to work and kicked the whole house down on top of the whole outfit. Them married men thinks that I lose all their spirit and instinct for riot and foolishness. They won't drink, they won't buck the tiger, they won't even fight. What do they want to go and stay married for, I ask myself. But Buck seems to be having hilarity in considerable quantities. Buck, old hoss, says he, isn't this just the hell-roaringest time we ever had in our lives? I don't know when I've been stirred up so. You see, I've been sticking pretty close to the home since I married, and I haven't been on a spree in a long time. Spree! Yes, that's what he called it. Playing checkers in the back room of the Gray Mule. I suppose it did seem to him a little more immoral and nearer to a prolonged debauch than standing over 6 tomato plants with a sprinkling pot. Every little bit Perry looks at his watch and says, I got to be home, you know, Buck, at 7. All right, I'd say, romp along and move. This here excitement's killing me. If I don't reform some and loosen up the strain of this checkered dissipation, I won't have any nerve left. It might have been 6:30 when commotions began to go on outside in the street. We heard a yelling and 6-shootering and a lot of galloping and maneuvers. What's that, I wonders? Oh, some nonsense outside, says Perry. It's your move. We just got time to play this game. I'll just take a peep through the window, says I, and see. You can't expect a mere mortal to stand the excitement of having a king jumped and listen to an unidentified conflict going on at the same time. Well, the Gray Mule Saloon was one of them old Spanish adobe buildings, and the back room only had 2 little windows, a foot wide, with iron bars in 'em. I looked out one, and I see the cause of the ruckus. There was the Trimble gang, 10 of 'em, the worst outfit of desperados and horse thieves in Texas, coming up the street shooting right and left. They was coming right straight for the Gray Mule. Then they got past the range of my sight, but we heard 'em right up to the front door, and then they socked the place full of lead. We heard the big looking-glass behind the bar knocked all to pieces and the bottles crashing. We could see Gotch-eared Mike in his apron running across the plaza like a coyote, with the bullets puffing up dust all around him. Then the gang went to work in the saloon, drinking what they wanted and smashing what they didn't. Me and Perry both knew that gang, and they knew us. The year before Perry married, him and me was in the same ranger company, and we fought that outfit down in the San Miguel and brought back Ben Trimble and 2 others for murder. We can't get out, says I. We'll have to stay in here till they leave. Perry looked at his watch. 25 to 7, says he. We can finish that game. I got 2 men on you. It's your move, Buck. I got to be home at 7, you know. Well, we sat down and went on playing. The Trimble gang had a rough house for sure. They were getting good and drunk. They'd drink a while and holler a while, then they'd shoot up a few bottles and glasses. 2 or 3 times they came and tried to open our door. Then there was some more shooting outside, and I looked out the window again. Ham Gossett, the town marshal, had a posse in the houses and stores across the street and was trying to bag a Trimble or 2 through the windows. I lost that game of checkers. I'm free in saying that I lost 3 kings that I might have saved if I'd been corralled in a more peaceful pasture. But that driveling married man sat there and cackled when he won a man like an unintelligent hen picking up a grain of corn. I've had a glorious time, Buck, says he, but I'll have to be going now. It's 6:45. I got to be home by 7, you know. I thought he was joking. They'll clear out or be dead drunk in half an hour or an hour, says I. You ain't that tired of being married that you want to commit any more sudden suicide, are you, says I, giving him the laugh. One time, says Perry, I was a half hour late getting home. I met Marianne on the street looking for me. If you could have seen her, Buck. But you don't understand. She knows what wild kind of a snoozer I've been, and she's afraid something will happen. I'll never be late getting home again. I'll say goodbye to you now, Buck. I got between him and the door. Married man, says I know you was christened a fool the minute the preacher tangled you up, but don't you never sometimes think one little think on a human basis? There's 10 of that gang in there, and they're pizened with whiskey and desire for murder. They'll drink you up like a bottle of booze before you get halfway to the door. Be intelligent now and use at least a wild hog sense. Sit down and wait till we have some chance of getting out without being carried in baskets. I got to be home by 7, Buck, repeats this hen-pecked thing of little wisdom, like an unthinking Paul parrot. Mariana says he'll be looking out for me. And he reaches down and pulls a leg out of the checker table. I'll go through this treble outfit, says he, like a cottontail through a bush corral. I'm not pestered any more with a desire to engage in ruckuses, but I got to be home by 7. You lock the door after me, Buck. And don't you forget, I won 3 of them 5 games. I'd play longer, but Mariana— Hush up, you old low-code roadrunner, I interrupts. Did you ever notice your Uncle Buck locking doors against trouble? I'm not married, says I, but I'm as big a damn fool as any Mormon. 1 from 4 leaves 3, says I, and I gathers out another leg of the table. We'll get home by 7, says I, whether it's the heavenly one or the other. May I see you home, says I, you sarsaparilla drinking, checkered playing glutton for death and destruction? We opened the door easy, and then stampeded for the front. Part of the gang was lined up at the bar, part of them was passing over the drinks, and 2 or 3 was peeping out the door and window taking shots at the marshal's crowd. The room was so full of smoke we got halfway to the front door before they noticed us. Then I heard Barry Trimble's voice somewhere yell out, "How'd that Buck Caperton get in here?" And he skinned the side of my neck with a bullet. I reckon he felt bad over that miss, for Barry's the best shot south of the Southern Pacific Railroad. But the smoke in the saloon was some too thick for good shooting. Me and Perry smashed over 2 of the gang with our table legs, which didn't miss like the guns did, and as we ran out the door, I grabbed a Winchester from a fellow who was watching the outside, and I turned and regulated the account of Mr. Barry. Me and Perry got out and around the corner all right. I never much expected to get out, but I wasn't going to be intimidated by that married man. According to Perry's idea, checkers was the event of the day, but if I am any judge of gentle recreations, that little table leg parade through the Gray Mule Saloon deserved the headlines in any bill of particulars. Walk fast, says Perry. It's 2 minutes to 7, and I got to be home. Oh, shut up, says I. I had an appointment as chief performer at an inquest at 7, and I'm not kicking about not keeping it. I had to pass by Perry's little house. His Mariana was standing out by the gate. We got there at 5 minutes past 7. She had on a blue wrapper and her hair was pulled back smooth like little girls do when they want to look grown folksy. She didn't see us till we got close, for she was gazing up the other way. Then she backed around and saw Perry, and a kind of look scooted around over her face. Danged if I could describe it. I heard her breathe long, just like a cow when you turn her calf in the lot, and she says, "You're late, Perry." 5 minutes, says Perry, cheerful. Me and old Buck was having a game of checkers. Well, Perry introduces me to Mariana, and they asked me to come in. No, sirree, I'd had enough truck with married folks for that day. I says I'll be going along, and that I've spent a pleasant afternoon with my old partner. Especially, says I, just to jostle Perry, during that game when the table legs came all loose. But I promised him not to let her know anything. I've been worried over that business ever since it happened, continued Buck. There's one thing about it that's got me all twisted up, and I can't figure it out. What was that? I asked as I rolled and handed Buck the last cigarette. Why, I'll tell you. When I saw the look that little woman give Perry when she turned around and saw him coming back to the ranch safe, why was it I got the idea all in a minute that look of hers was worth more than the whole caboodle of us, sarsaparilla, checkers and all, and that the damn fool of the game wasn't named Perry Roundtree at all?